anyone else would know that today's the day where the sharks are out, people know you made a lot of mistakes, and you have to be careful about what you say. You have to play it safe. And he went out and just spewed the same garbage and really offensive, mean stuff. Basically shrugging his shoulders and being like, yeah, people die, but so what? This guy has such an ego. It's really unbelievable. And that's why I wanted to have Councilman Joe Borelli from New York's 11th Congressional District on with us. Thank you so much for being with us, Mr. Borelli.
Anytime, Grace. Thanks for having me.
So, Joe, were you the person who tweeted today, who's Andrew Cuomo going to blame at this press conference?
Oh, yeah. I mean, he certainly didn't blame Andrew Cuomo, the only person who put his name on a piece of paper ordering the people back into the nursing homes who were testing positive for COVID. I mean, there is no one else to blame, but yet he found, Republicans, he found Donald Trump, the administration, the current administration. I'm surprised he hasn't started blaming, AMC and GameStop at this point.
Yeah, I saw the replies to your tweet, and a lot of people were saying he's going to blame Reddit. But I didn't see him throwing Roger Stone into the mix. I thought that was a real desperate move.
I mean, it just goes, as you said, just the genuine depravity of one human. I mean, this is a guy who said, blame me when it all began. And by the way, Grace, the pandemic was unprecedented. And I think, and I know I would personally, give a lot of leeway to governors and mayors, whoever, who made some errors, as long as they were doing it in their best judgment, in the best interest. I think there's a lot of room for that. But when you're the guy who just denies any responsibility and then goes out and writes a book about how successful you handled it, or makes posters. I mean, the guy has posters for sale. There are a couple of people in this world who make political leaders who make posters about themselves. It comes to mind. Kim Jong-un comes to mind. Putin comes to mind. This guy made posters about himself and his life and his family and was selling them to New Yorkers. He's a sick man.
And Joe, I find it amazing now that people like Chris Cillizza and people at CNN are saying, oh, and NBC News last night ran a piece on it, like, oh, this is really bad. I guess his reputation wasn't what we all thought, and maybe he didn't handle this as well as we thought he did. It makes me want to scream because I'm thinking people like Joe Borelli and Janice Dean have been talking about this for months and months and months.
Yeah, and you even saw little bits of people at other, certainly not CNN, but even, Sarah Rule gave him a little bit of a go-around, and then something happened. Something happened with the C-suite level people at some of these networks, and if you push back on Andrew Cuomo even a little bit, you're told not to do that. Don't do that again. He's our hero. He's our next thing. But by the way, the best thing Joe Biden ever did as president in the first 2 weeks was not giving us an Andrew Cuomo cabinet position. America won in that respect, by the way, and that's something we could all stand and congratulate Joe Biden on doing for us.
Well, Joe, I don't want you to forget that a few months ago it seemed like Andrew Cuomo might be our next president. The press was saying that he should run.
Right. I mean, the press literally took everything he was saying, hook, line, and sinker, fell over themselves. And again, this is a guy who, the minute things started getting good, he wrote a book about himself. He had fundraisers with Hollywood celebrities. I think he even called them by their first name, Bobby and Bruce. For Robert De Niro and Bruce, those are his homeboys. I mean, he just uses their first name. And this is who he wanted us to think he was, this Emmy Award-winning, cool dude in a loose mood. I love having ladies talk about me. And all this time, people in New York State, including Democrats, are saying, but, Governor, what's going on with the nursing homes? Why are all these people unaccounted for who are now dead? And his reaction was to criticize. I mean, there's one state assemblyman who's a Democrat who lost family members in a nursing home, can't get answers. And the governor's staff is just attacking this guy for no reason. I mean, he's not doing anything crazy. You're the governor. You're supposed to be accountable to the state legislature. Then you mentioned Janice Dean. I mean, just dismissing her concerns as oh, she's just the weather lady. Calling family members death cults because they're out there protesting at the state capitol asking for the nursing home information that he just refused to give.
It's really amazing, and it seems like his ego has taken control. They started calling him King Cuomo, and I think that's very accurate. The guy doesn't have, and I mentioned this earlier, Joe. I'm talking to Joe Borelli, the councilman from New York's 11th Congressional District. Janice Dean wrote in one of her pieces that, like you, she would have given a lot of leeway if he had ever owned up to anything, or at least, seemed like he showed some empathy or sympathy for some of these victims and their families, but he didn't. He just completely sidestepped that so he could go on The View and go on the Smothers Brothers routine with Chris Cuomo with the giant Q-tip.
Yeah, it's really sad. It really is, insulting to some family members who were just completely dismissed. And, I'm glad, though, that America is finally seeing, and peeling back the onion of who Andrew Cuomo really is. He is not this competent, benevolent dictator that some try to prop him up to be. I mean, today he just announced, coincidentally today, right, certainly not to bury the news of the nursing homes, but he just announced that restaurants in New York City are going to be reopening in over 2 weeks. So obviously it was just done today to bury the other headlines. But
Wow.
It's like he never thinks about people. Like, they're going to open restaurants at 25% capacity on Valentine's Day on Sunday. What will happen on Sunday that won't happen on Friday and Saturday night? And, thus giving some restaurants maybe a little bit of an opportunity to make some money on what normally is a busy weekend. It just
Joe,
goes to show you how bad he is.
And he keeps trying to spin now. I mean, the press conference he gave today, I know you watched it. It was really horrific. I mean, the guy had no good answers. He was just kind of rambling, and I would have thought that his staff would have said, hey, we really need to be on point with this. Stay on the message. He didn't at all, but he never really seemed to own up to anything, and he seemed to then start saying, well, either way, people would have died. But if that's the case, then why did you guys undercount it? If it didn't make a difference if people died in a hospital or in a nursing home, why lie and not count them as nursing home deaths unless you thought it was going to make you look bad?
Yeah, and when people question it, I mean, again, this is one of those things where the cover-up is worse than the crime. I mean, if mistakes were made, if he came out in a week after sending people to nursing homes and said, hey, by the way, now we have the hospital ship at New York Harbor. Now we have the Javits Center hospital open. Now we can bring people to those places. People would have been so forgiving, and he might have actually been the leader that some people think he was. And again, with the same thing with counting the deaths. If there was nothing to ever hide, if you didn't feel guilty, if you didn't think you did the wrong thing, then why not just give the data over the minute someone questioned it?
Right.
It doesn't make any sense other than the fact, as you pointed out, that it was wrong, it was a cover-up, and it was to protect his reputation over anything else.
Now, we are talking about Governor Cuomo, but I want to switch over briefly here to Bill de Blasio, the mayor of New York City. He said, he gave this weird, I don't know if you saw this, Joe. It was a State of the City speech, but he didn't really give a speech. It was kind of just like a long 30-minute commercial with stock photos, and he kind of narrated it. And in it, he said that we must redistribute the wealth of New York City. What do you think? What do you think of Bill de Blasio, and what do you think of the people who are trying to run for mayor? Who do you have your money on?
Well, I'll say this about Bill de Blasio. At least he's honest, and I mean that. I mean, at least he's open about who he is, about what he's trying to do. And redistribute wealth and usher in a new age of socialist, party rule in New York City was his plan. It was his plan before he was mayor, and he's been very open about those intentions. As far as who the next mayor is, I actually think there's a good chance we'll be saying in a year or two from now, wow, that Bill de Blasio, he wasn't so bad after all, because the current guy is terrible. And that's unfortunately the direction I think we're heading in. I mean, now in the city council, we now have, in the same election year, 8 open socialists running for city council. And there's not just 8 of them. There's 8 people who are probably going to win. I mean, there's other socialist candidates in other races. But there's 8 people. That's almost 10% of the city council. 20% of the city council that will be open, avowed socialists. So it's going to be a wild ride for New York City. If you're thinking of moving here, stay home.
What do you think about Andrew Yang? Jared's a big Yang guy.
Yeah, look. I respect the fact that he's not tied to any, far left political radical group. I respect the fact that he's not tied to some, entrenched Democratic machine organization, and I respect the fact that he's one of the only candidates out there offering some new ideas, some new solutions, some new takes on how New York City can run. I would be happier if Andrew Yang became the mayor than many of the other Democratic candidates in the race. 100%, very confident saying that.
Now, Joe, what do you see for the future of New York? Because I read today, someone had tweeted out the story about Bill de Blasio saying we must redistribute the wealth of New York City. And then someone else had retweeted it and said he did. Now it's all in Florida. And it really made me laugh. But I thought it's scary because I feel bad for people. I love New York. I mean, I love New York City. I know you do. It makes me nervous for the future of that state when it's a mass exodus. Nobody wants to be there.
I mean, people were willing for many years to pay a premium to live here. I mean, it is a nice place to live. It's fashionable. It's posh. It's exciting. It's all those things people see in the movies. And they were willing to pay that extra 10%, extra 15%. It costs to live in a desirable area. And now that just got eliminated. I mean, the biggest criticism right now of Andrew Yang is that during the pandemic, he went to his second home in New Paltz, New York, which is a beautiful part of New York State. And he's just, more reflective of how middle-class people, I mean, he's wealthy, but how middle-class people really have thought or rethought about New York. I mean, my family, it's a fight for me to tell my wife we have to stay here for another 4 or 5 years. When we think about the lifestyle we can live elsewhere, for the money we can live elsewhere, it becomes more and more difficult to stay. And I joke around because I'm on your show right now. I do a show quite often in North Carolina, and I joke with the host there that I probably know a bigger share of his audience than even him. I mean, with just the amount of New Yorkers who flee for pension purposes, for low cost of living purposes. I mean, most of the people I graduated high school with 20 years ago have now moved out of New York State, out of Staten Island, our hometown.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with you. I think if Andrew Yang, if that's the biggest thing they have against him, he could just say, well, I had to leave. I couldn't stay here because Bill de Blasio made this place a hellhole. I mean, I think a lot of people would relate to that.
Heck, if I had a beautiful house in New Paltz, I mean, there's great restaurants, great hiking up there. I just spent the entire year there myself. But right, I mean, they have no real attack against Andrew Yang. I mean, no one cares about policy. This is a city that's just governed by identity politics. So no one's even criticizing him and saying, what do you think your basic income plan is going to cost too much? No one's even at that level yet. They're just trying to take personal pot shots at the guy to knock him down a peg because he is leading in so many of the polls.
Yeah, and there's a Real Housewife, Joe, who's running for mayor as well. I just wanted you to know that. Barbara Kay.
I did know that, and her friend Luann de Lesseps has actually been very helpful in funding restaurants and doing a lot of work during the pandemic.
The Countess.
So I'm not a reality fan, but that's good news.
I love Luann de Lesseps, the Countess. Thank you so much, Joe Borelli. We really appreciate it. Joe, where can people find you on Twitter?
At Joe Borelli NYC, and I'm very witty. I trust me.
No, he is. He really keeps up with all of the current tweets, and he always has good takes, and he's always sticking it to Andrew Cuomo. I follow so many people, Kara Markowitz, Joe Borelli, Janice Dean, and I'm not even from New York. I don't live in New York, but I like seeing New Yorkers who are going after Andrew Cuomo and holding his feet to the fire. I've been watching this guy for months, talking about Chelsea Handler and who he's dating and going on The View and wearing his leather bomber jacket. And I was like, am I missing something? I feel like this guy's doing a terrible job. And today, it's kind of a nice moment because it's official. Him saying, well, people are going to die. People died. That's really... Remember a month ago he was saying Santa's going to be really good to me because I did a really good job? How times have changed. Thank you so much, Joe Borelli. We appreciate it. We'll be back on the other side with your calls, 844-500-4242. Don't go anywhere. This is The Grace Curley Show.
The Grace Curley Show will be right back.